Minnesotans have always valued our state's natural and cultural resources. To support the things we love, how can we secure funding? Citizen stakeholders, including conservationists, sportsmen, and the arts community, led a grassroots movement to dedicate a source of funding through law. In 2008, the voters of Minnesota approved a constitutional amendment to increase the state sales tax by 0.3%. It's raised over $1 billion to date. This funding will remain in the state constitution for 25 years. Shall the Minnesota Constitution be amended to dedicate funding to protect our drinking water sources, to protect, enhance, and restore our wetlands, prairies, forests, and fish, game, and wildlife habitat, to preserve our arts and cultural heritage, to support our parks and trails, and to protect, enhance, and restore our lakes, rivers, streams, and groundwater? Legacy revenue is distributed into 4 categories. Here's a basic breakdown. Let's look at them one by one. 33% of funding goes to the Clean Water Fund. Those funds go toward protecting, enhancing, and restoring our surface and groundwaters. 5% is dedicated to clean drinking water projects. In the land of 10,000 lakes, clean water is definitely a priority. Let's look at an example. The University of Minnesota received $750,000 to develop a 10-year plan and 25-year framework for the state's water issues. The comprehensive report, the Minnesota Water Sustainability Framework, was the first of its kind in Minnesota, and it was completed by the U's Water Resource Center, led by Deb Swackheimer. What is water sustainability? The framework looks at water use, as defined by the legislature, as that which does not harm ecosystems, degrade water quality, or compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The report considers the top 10 environmental, economic, and social challenges, and lays out strategies and recommendations for addressing them. 33% of funding goes to the Outdoor Heritage Fund. Those funds may be spent only to restore, protect, and enhance wetlands, prairies, forests, and habitat for fish, game, and wildlife. The initial recommendations of how this fund should be allocated are decided by the Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council, established by the legislature. Let's look at an example. The Board of Water and Soil Resources, in partnership with Pheasants Forever, has received over $10 million for their Buffers for Wildlife and Water programs. This funding increases the quality and quantity of riparian buffers, which are strips of land adjacent to surface waters like ditches, streams, and rivers. A buffer, when planted with perennial native grasses, can catch and filter agricultural and urban runoff, limit stream bank erosion, and provide habitat for wildlife like pheasants. They say this program bridges the resource benefits of the Clean Water Fund and Outdoor Heritage Fund, resulting in the protection of enhanced wildlife buffers on private land. The additional clean water funding match has helped landowners secure and manage hundreds of acres of land easements. 14.25% of funding goes to the Parks and Trails Fund. These funds are intended for long-term projects of regional or statewide significance. Let's look at an example. The Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board received more than $560,000 for their Central Mississippi Riverfront and Above the Falls regional parks. This funding supported development of Mill Ruins Park at St. Anthony Falls, an attraction at the historical heart of Minneapolis. The funding also supported an international design competition to craft a new vision for the area above the falls. The 2012 River First Plan has been adopted as city policy and made progress in its development of parks and trails. Additionally, 19.75% goes to the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Categories receiving consideration include improving access to the arts, lifelong arts learning, folk arts, festivals, and ongoing arts organizations. Let's look at an example. Over several years, the Minnesota Zoo has received about $5 million for their conservation education programs. They say, educating Minnesotans about conservation issues and how they can engage in conservation activities is critical to the stewardship of our state's heritage and resources. Legacy funds have been used to create new programs and expand existing activities to bring zoo guests and citizens statewide in close contact with animals and the ways people can participate in conservation in their own backyard. Who distributes and uses the money? There are several administering agencies. Some of these agencies utilize the funds in their own programs, and some facilitate grant programs to other organizations and individuals. Please note, this is an incomplete list. So far, the Legacy Amendment has had a hugely beneficial impact on the state. The funding has made many projects possible and has been comprehensive in administration. But with any allocation of money, goods, or services, especially on this large scale, there are perceived inequalities. Some critiques were identified and published in the February 2014 edition of Twin Cities Business magazine. The article, "The Minnesota Legacy Amendment: Whose Legacy Is It?" calls out key players influencing the amendment and calls for improved monitoring of the fund's usage. It notes that some organizations, like Pheasants Forever, have received a disproportionate share of the tax revenue. Here are some of the amendment's largest private and public beneficiaries. Let's apply some of the themes and elements of environmental policy to our analysis of the Legacy Amendment. This can be seen as a proactive response to many of our environmental issues. It dedicated this source of funding to future problems as well. The public perceived the need for this funding, supported by scientific observations of our environment and cultural heritage. It represents a long-term investment in these issues versus a short-term gain of keeping the taxes. When thinking about other established policy successes and precedents for this type of amendment, there aren't any at the time it was passed. The Legacy Amendment was an unprecedented source of funding for environmental and cultural programs. The voters of Minnesota weighed economic development against environmental health and decided to support the Legacy Amendment. The overall narrative of the Legacy Amendment's creation and its policy impacts is central to our Minnesotan worldview and demonstrates the value we place on our land, water, wildlife, and natural and cultural resources. It shows an optimism towards addressing environmental issues. What's the future outlook for the Legacy Amendment? By 2034, will it be reauthorized, ended, or long since outlawed?